Welcome all to the Saphira Center of Shamanism, where we break down the ancient esoteric practices of shamanism and the occult, bringing them into balance with the deep psyche. My name is Luke, experienced practitioner and mentor of the shamanic and occult sciences. It is an honor to have you here. Thank you for joining me once again. Be sure to find me over on Patreon within the first link of the description of this video. Access starts at just £20 per month, and you will find over 300 pieces of exclusive content relating to the shamanic and occult sciences, with new content uploaded multiple times each week. You will find content that caters for all levels, beginner, intermediate, and advanced. You will find simple practices on expanding your vessel, training your system to hold advanced occult energies. You will also find intermediate work surrounding building a solid foundation for your sustainable practice of spirituality and shamanism and the occult. And you will also find the full initiatory systems through the Tree of Life, the Tree of Death, the Necronomicon Gnosis, and many, many other things as well. Tier 1 and 2 grant you the basic access to the core exclusive content and the core initiatory ritual that I perform every full moon as a grand Qliphothic empowerment through all of the Qliphothic spheres. But Tier 3 and higher are very much for those who are wanting more direct access to me and who are wanting access to my powerful occult training and initiation webinars that take place live multiple times each month, as well as access to all of the recordings of previous webinars as well. Definitely check that out. Access starts at just £20 per month, and I look forward to seeing you there. So today we are going to be discussing quite a taboo area of occultism. We're going to be discussing the most damaging mistakes that many practitioners make in their explorations into the occult sciences. As well as these mistakes being immensely dangerous, they are also extremely easy to fall into by accident. I will start by saying that the occult sciences are some of the most taboo areas of self-development. In fact, very few people who explore the occult actually realize that evolution has to be at the forefront of one's being. Too many occult practitioners are just cycling in power struggle, nihilism, and trying to control and manipulate their reality, trying to curse people. It's all coming from a place of power struggle. We have to understand that trauma integration work has to be at the forefront of your intention. Otherwise, you have no chance of integrating any of the energies that you are tapping into. You have to ensure that you are taking sufficient time each day in contemplation, in presence, and you're allowing space for integration between your occult initiatory pursuits. Otherwise, you are just going to disorientate your system and do what most occult practitioners do and feed more fragmentation within their being. It is the vast minority who are genuinely interested in true individuation, shadow integration, and the true evolution of their soul. You have to understand that the occult is about anchoring your true will into your physical, tangible experience, learning how to use the world around you as the vessel for your soul evolution, and not as a vessel for continuous fragmentation and re-traumatization. But in order to do this, you have to commit to an ongoing path of evolution. When you step onto the occult path, this is me saying it as it is, when you step onto the full occult initiatory path, your initiatory journey is becoming more difficult. In other words, your life is becoming more challenging. What you're doing, particularly when you step onto some of the advanced initiatory systems, such as the Tree of Life, the Tree of Death, you are basically consolidating your karma. You're bringing the karma that you have within your energetic body and unifying it into this lifetime, which means you are going to experience restriction, limitation, and all things that are needing to be experienced. You are basically, particularly if you're exploring the darker aspects of the occult, you are basically summoning your own internal obstacles so that you can face them head on. When you face these obstacles with grace and you integrate what they represent, then you experience a paradoxical liberation. In other words, the challenges on the occult path become more challenging and dense, but the evolution and blessing that you receive from facing them head on are going to be significant. So the occult path is opening yourself up to an ongoing process of being challenged, having your ego challenged every single day, having your beliefs challenged every single day, so that you can undergo deeper levels of evolution in the grand scheme of your life. So understand that before exploring any of the advanced initiatory systems, particularly for those who are interested in exploring the Qliphoth, especially the realms that are beyond the Qliphothic spheres and beyond the Sephiroth as well. So we have to understand how to approach mistakes, because you are going to make mistakes. You're not going to be perfect. What you have to ensure as a practitioner to be sustainable is that you are taking accountability for your stuff, you are taking ownership of where you are going wrong, and ultimately you are committing to stepping into your deepest and most profound levels of vulnerability. In other words, you are releasing separation consciousness and journeying into a space whereby you are learning to actually welcome your emotions and see everything as an aspect of you. This is the key to success within the occult sciences, and a lot of mistakes that practitioners make are simply falling outside of these very simple protocols in terms of either being oblivious to or completely forgetting about the fact that trauma integration has to come first, that you need to take time to integrate, that you need to spend time in contemplation, you need to ultimately be committed to individuation. So many practitioners get stuck in the noise, okay? The occult is absolutely riddled with booby traps. It's all built off of false stories, okay? Yes, the energetic transfigurations that you go through are very real. The energetic benefits that you gain from occult work are very, very real. But we have to not attach to these stories. Don't attach to the story of becoming a black magician. Don't attach to the story of becoming an ascended black master or whatever you call it, yeah? Don't attach to the role of the occultist. Don't attach to the story of chakra unification, chakra dissolving, or any of those outer layer things. Ask yourself, why are you going into this in the first place? What parts of you just want to be seen as powerful? What parts of you have learnt that they have to be seen as powerful in order to define their sense of self? What part of you is projecting your sovereignty onto whether you attain something external or not? We have to embrace the multiplicity of self. There are going to be different parts that want to go into the occult for different reasons. Your responsibility is to take ownership of these different aspects of self so that you do not fall a victim to them unconsciously. So we are going to dive in to the core, most damaging mistakes that many practitioners make within the occult. These are also mistakes that I have made myself. So I'm not putting myself on a pedestal. These are mistakes that I have made myself. And sometimes these are mistakes that I also continue to fall into, particularly around presence and taking sufficient time to integrate. So definitely stay tuned as we dive in to the most damaging but also most common mistakes in the occult. Okay, so when it comes to mistakes that are easily made within the occult sciences, we first have to realize that a lot of this is due to misinformation. Realistically, there is no right or wrong way to utilize the occult. You can utilize it in whatever way you feel called to, but you have to understand that whatever intention you have is either going to be aligned to your soul or not. In other words, you can either use the occult to fuel fragmentation or fuel integration. Okay, the choice is yours. Your soul is going to want integration, is going to want ultimately evolution, vulnerability, and all of these different things. Whereas your ego is going to want separation. Okay, so you can use the occult sciences to fuel either one of these things. It is your job to learn how to discern the information that you are receiving. Understand if it is fueling greater levels of separation or greater levels of integration. It is really that simple. Anything that tries to get you to scapegoat anything that is outside of you, scapegoat a spirit, scapegoat a curse, and see it as separate from you is obviously going to fuel greater levels of fragmentation, but that is going to feel safer to the ego. This is why many practitioners get stuck within the same re-traumatizing cycles within the occult, because those cycles are actually comfortable for the ego. It is the ego that wants to have control over everything, simply because it has learnt that it is the only way to feel safe within their reality, whereas the soul is going to want fluidity. So the goal of occult work that is actually working at your evolutionary best interest is to actually become more fluid, to release your predefined identity structures, to release your grip on reality needing to be a certain way, and allowing your reality to be pulled in through nothing more than resonance. The true will is going to be aligned to what your inner child needs, and it's very easy to go into the occult and completely ignore the inner child, scapegoat the inner child, and think that you are actually doing the work. But what you are actually doing is fueling greater levels of fragmentation. It is very, very easy to do so. So any occult teachings that are built towards rejecting something that is outside of you, whether it's rejecting the light, a lot of the satanic community reject light. It's all about rebellion and all about these things. And then they reject the aspect of their psyche, their pure awareness, the light that is responsible for integration and bringing awareness to the shadow. So then they just end up cycling within the same re-traumatizing patterns within the dark matter. It's why so many practitioners completely lose touch with reality, fall into delusions, and think that they have come much further than they have. So you have to understand here that there's fragmentation and there is evolution. So mistakes are subjective. Okay, if you are going into this to perceive yourself more as separate from the world around you, in other words, you want to be seen as the one with all the power, you want to be seen as the one who can manipulate reality, then you are going into it with separation consciousness, at which point that is what you are going to get. You are going to become more fragmented. You're going to still be chasing the same power struggles. You're going to still be cycling within the same karmic patterns, experiencing the same old crap within relationship dynamics, and you're going to remain within that separation consciousness, okay? And your occult work is then going to validate the ego more, and then you're going to become more and more fragmented. It's a bit like light workers, people who call themselves light workers, are rejecting their internal darkness completely, but are actually then handing over more power to the unseen forces within their psyche and are basically holding themselves captive to the unmet needs and desires that they are choosing not to look at. It's the same with occult work. You can use it to avoid, or you can use it to face what you are avoiding. When you are avoiding something, you are identifying with it and you are then making that your reality. What you are ignoring, if you're ignoring light and you're ignoring oppression, I see it all the time with Gnostic-based alchemists trying to ignore the demiurge or ignore the archons. They are actually falling into greater levels of oppression because they are identifying with that oppression by trying to avoid it. If you avoid a demonic entity, then you are identifying with what a demonic entity actually represents, and you are then giving those aspects of the psyche more of a power over you, and you are likely going to get brought initiatory trials, archetypal experiences in your day-to-day life that mirror what you are repressing. So understand that occult work is often built from the place of escapism, and many people who call themselves occultists just end up running away from their own stuff, projecting it into spirit work, projecting it into invocations, and it really feels like you're doing the work. It is very much the same as if I start taking loads of psychedelics and I'm experiencing lots of powerful experiences with psychedelics. You see it a lot in the plant medicine community, people drinking ayahuasca or people working with mushrooms or LSD. And because they're experiencing those fireworks, those powerful multi-dimensional experiences, the ego then latches onto that and says, I am doing the work. So it uses that as a mechanism to escape from what feels unsafe to it. And it's exactly the same with spirit work. Spirit work gives you a lot of fireworks. It's very satisfying. In a lot of ways, it's intoxicating when you're invoking spirits, okay, opening up astral gateways, bringing energies into your body. It's tangible, it's powerful, it is immense, and it does have the potential to be extremely transformative. But if you can't be present with yourself and you can't sit with yourself and actually observe what those energies are bringing to the surface, then your occult work is going to get more hard on the body the further along the path you go. If you are actually taking time to sit and be present with yourself and welcome your emotions, then the occult work is going to fuel your evolution significantly. But because many practitioners get so caught up in the outer layer noise, they get caught in the ego traps in terms of wanting to be seen as a vampire, wanting to be seen as this, wanting to call themselves a black magician, wanting to call themselves an occultist, wanting to go by the name of shaman. Because so many people get caught in those outer layer ego traps, they then project their wounds into these predefined roles and then use them unconsciously as mechanisms to escape from things that they don't want to look at within themselves. And the more you tap into occult energies, the more you tap into spirits and different intelligences like that, the more repressed energy is going to try and come to the surface. So if you then try and avoid it through then throwing yourself into another bit of occult work or into another path working, then it's going to bring more of that energy to the surface. And if you can't actually deal with it consciously, then all of this is going to build up within your unconscious mind. And if it continues to build up, that's when people fall into delusion, they fall into fragmentation, they re-traumatize themselves through continuous unnecessary rupture, and it just becomes a tool to fuel greater fragmentation. And again, if you want that and you want to perceive yourself as separate and you want to live in the narcissistic bubble of the black magician and you want to live in the narcissistic bubble of occultism, then there's nothing wrong with that. Feel free, go and do it. But you're not going to experience evolution by doing that. You're just going to cycle within the same stuff. And then you can take on path working after path working, spirit work after spirit work, current after current, modality after modality, and not actually move anywhere because you're not taking the time to fully integrate it. And this can be detrimental to your mental health. This is the thing. So a lot of occult mistakes, and the most dangerous mistakes, come through simply not being present with oneself, avoiding their emotions through more occult work, and more than anything, not understanding what this work is really about. This work requires contemplation. It requires you to go into what you are avoiding. And to do that, you need to see through a lot of total bullshit that is within the occult community. Anything that is like curse your enemy, anything that is like, oh yeah, no, see that as outside of you, anything that is like, oh yeah, I'll remove that curse for you, anything that's like, oh, I'm going to help you attain this money by this time, is total rubbish. Okay, I'm not saying that it's not going to get results sometimes, but it's not going to get you consistent results. And it's just going to cause you to cycle within the same power struggles, projecting your sovereignty onto things outside of you that you have yet to attain, and all of these different things. So understand that it is up to you. Fragmentation or evolution. Fragmentation or evolution. Fragmentation, perceive yourself as separate, exist within your narcissistic bubble. Or evolution, which is going to feel by default more uncomfortable because you're going to become more open, more vulnerable, and you're going to actually start purifying your karma and experiencing the opposite. Whereas if you are ignoring your karma and you're just engaging in practices that are just going to build more accumulated karma, which happens every time you ignore your true self. In other words, every time you ignore the needs of your inner child, that is building accumulated karma that is then going to bring you more extreme initiatory experiences in order to break that karma. And if you keep trying to avoid it, then it's going to get worse and you are going to hurt yourself through your occult practices. So evolution comes through integration, comes through taking time to see and get to know yourself. Understand what your inner child actually wants from life, because this is your true will. Your inner child's desires is your true will. And if you align your life consciously to meet the needs of the inner child, then you are going to connect more to your soul and you are going to live a life that is for your evolutionary best interest. So on that note, bearing in mind that your discernment has to be, okay, is this information aiding my evolution or aiding my fragmentation? Okay, that's how you discern. Is this teaching causing me to actually try and separate myself more from what I'm avoiding? Scapegoat the spirits, scapegoat the person who's apparently cursing me, scapegoat my ability to feel enough onto the next thing that I attain materially speaking, or is it actually helping me become more vulnerable, become more open, and understand what desires and unmet needs are actually fueling my deeper need for separation? So evolution is always going to feel more uncomfortable and less known because you are embodying a fluid state of consciousness, whereas separation is going to feel more comfortable purely because it's set in stone. It's a reality that is already predefined for you. Occult work is about liquefying the ego, not removing the ego, liquefying the ego, releasing the predefined identity, and moving with the fluidity of your soul. When you're focusing on evolution, the low magical aspects and all things relating to that are going to mold accordingly. Okay, it really is that simple. So on that note, let's dive into some of the most damaging mistakes. And as I said, I have made these mistakes myself. First mistake that I've mentioned is lack of presence. When you don't have the time to be present with yourself, when you don't take time each day to observe your body sensations and observe your emotions, there is no chance of being able to ground any of your occult initiatory pursuits. It's really that simple. If you don't take time welcoming your emotions and you are not happy with sitting where you are without looking towards the next thing that you need to invoke, the next intelligence that you need to tap into, the next initiatory sphere that you need to enter, then you are not going to integrate what you are invoking, and it's going to become more disorientating as you get into the later stages of your initiatory process. So having time to be present each day is absolutely essential. Okay, no distractions. Okay, no, not even ritual, not even candles. Sit, stare at the wall. No technology. Welcome your feelings. Welcome the sensations that are in your body and be present with where you are. No distractions. Be present and contemplate your process. This is how the deep transformation really takes place. You might enter a Qliphothic sphere, invoke a spirit that will bring up energies and emotions that then need to be sat with in order to be alchemized. If you're going straight to the next thing, then you're not actually going to be integrating anything at all. You're just getting caught in the fireworks. What I like to say, getting caught in the fireworks, where you think you're doing the work, but actually you're just dissociating yourself through the powerful sensations and visuals that you get when you invoke a spirit or you do another piece of ritual work. So understand that what comes up has to come down. Anything you enter, any realm that you enter, anything you merge your consciousness with is only the transmission, and it is going to result in a series of transmutation events, be that externally in the world around you or internally, to get you to own what you are needing to and integrate what you're needing to. So time consistent time each day in presence, stillness, and contemplation is absolutely essential for success within your process. And if you do not have that, then you will not ground anything that you tap into by any means. The second point that I'm going to go into is moving too quickly. And this is aligned to the first one as well. I've seen this happen with many people. They move too quickly between different currents of energy, between initiations. Now, this happens very frequently within initiatory technologies such as the Qliphoth and the Sephiroth. Very, very easy mistake is to rush through the sphere workings, rush from spirit to spirit, whatever that may mean for you. It comes down to the same thing that I said before. What comes up has to come down. What you enter into has to be given time to transmute throughout your system. The amount of people that I've seen, they go into a sphere, they spend 2 weeks in a sphere. Yeah, 1 to 2 weeks within a sphere. They think, oh, okay, that's enough because I'm not feeling anything in terms of tangible body sensations anymore. So I'm just going to move on. Okay, big mistake, because you're then not taking time to fully integrate where you are. Now, admittedly, you are going to move through some spheres and some initiatory processes quicker than you think. This does happen. But when you are just piling initiation onto initiation, you are going to experience the adverse effects at some point. And a lot of occult energies are there specifically to give you rope. Okay, and when I say give you rope, I mean they often egg you on. Okay, they resonate with your ego, and your ego is like, okay, yeah, no, do this, invoke that spirit, invoke that spirit. But your job is again to discern where that intention is coming from. Not just discerning what information you're receiving from teachers, what information you're receiving from spirits, but ultimately to discern what your whole reasoning is for wanting to embark on the next initiatory process or invoke the next spirit or engage in the next practice. Because it's very easy to use it as a tool to escape yourself. Otherwise, what's going to happen? You're going to get further along in the initiatory process, and the Qliphoth, you may open up loads of spheres, but again, that energy has to come down. It has to come through your vessel. This is the thing. It all has to filter back through the Earth sphere. The energies all have to filter back through Malkuth, through your physical body. And if you're just opening all of these different spheres and not taking that sufficient time between those spheres, it's going to fuel greater levels of fragmentation because you are not actually willing to come back to the first point, which is presence and stillness. So moving too quickly is immensely dangerous for your initiatory process and for your alchemical process because the nervous system can only hold so much. Now, when you are a dabbler, the spirits give you rope. This is what I mean. When you're a dabbler, you can dabble with this, tap into that spirit, whatever it is. It's there to be enjoyed. I'm not saying that it's not there to be enjoyed and there to be reveled in. Okay, it's exploration. It's a lot of fun. Enjoy it. But when you actually start to get serious about your process and you actually are stepping beyond the dabbler and into the role of the formal initiate, this is where you have to consolidate things. You have to consolidate things and really feel into, if you feel called to tap into a different current, ask yourself, what relevance does this have to my existing initiatory process? Okay, the amount of people that I have worked with who are like, okay, so they enter into the first sphere of the Qliphoth, for example, and then we meet a month later, and then next thing they know, they've initiated into the next 3 spheres. And I'm like, that's a month. A month. You've initiated into 4 spheres within the space of a month. Are you mental? Yeah, it may feel satisfying and it may feel like you're able to handle it here and now, but when you get later into the process, good God. Do you know what I mean? Like, what's going to happen later down the line? All of that is going to come pouring through your body, and it's going to be very, very difficult to ground. Now, I'm not trying to govern anybody's experience. I'm not saying I'll spend this long on this sphere, this long on that sphere. But take time to properly integrate what you're processing. Because particularly if you're embarking on occult initiation, your process, even without doing invocations, your process is going to be ongoing. Your alchemy is just going to continue and it's never going to stop. Okay. When you're actually in a full occult initiatory system, you are going to be going through some form of alchemy at some point in your process. All the time, there's going to be something going on. What I've seen for many people who are actually grounding the information that they're receiving and grounding the initiations is many actually towards the end of their process don't even perform that many initiations at all. You know, a lot of their processes are geared towards actually just observing the initiatory energy in day-to-day life. Yeah. So understand that moving too quickly can have a detrimental effect. And at first, you will get away with it. But as you get into the later stages of your process, this is not going to work for you. It is going to all come crashing down onto you like a ton of bricks, particularly if you are working with dark matter intelligences. It is all going to come crashing down and it's not going to be comfortable because you are invoking immense density and it all has to come back through you. Okay. This links to the third point, which is bypassing. Okay, bypassing. In moving too quickly, you can very easily bypass lessons. Okay, spiritual bypassing is immensely common within the occult sciences. When you are trying to bypass your feelings in order to get to an illusionary state of consciousness that you think that you need to be. It's the same as an addiction. This is the whole point, okay? It's the exact same as an addiction. These energies are intoxicating, immensely intoxicating, and they're so easily used to bypass your body sensations. And it creates the illusion of healing because you're feeling things tangibly in the body. You're feeling all of these fireworks and all of these different things like that. But where does that energy go? Again, comes back to processing. Where does that energy go if you are not able to effectively process it? Where does the energy go if you're trying to spiritually bypass through the next activity that you're trying to do? It goes inside and it's going to build up. So bypassing is immensely common, and this is easily severed by understanding where your needs are not being met as your inner child, where your needs for your inner child are not being met in your day-to-day life, and what is actually fueling your intention for going into the occult in the first place. Absolutely essential. The next mistake is focusing too much on the material. This is very common for dabblers. Now, material gain does not just mean money. It also means relationships. It can also mean wanting to embody an illusionary state of power. This is very common within the occult sciences, focusing too much on outer layer things, focusing too much on money, and when you do that, you are going to repel the result. Focus on evolution, focus on trauma integration, and the material gain will eventually follow because you are committing to integrating your trauma. What's stopping the results that you want from coming in the first place is repressed trauma and feeling like you're not good enough. So when you're encountering these different things within yourself willingly, you're releasing the linear result, and it means that it's going to start to flow towards you at a more accelerated rate as soon as you let it go. This is the thing. So high magic, which is all things relating to evolution, when you embark on high magic, that will eventually lead to the low magic. It will eventually pull through to the low magical aspects of your being. Okay. The next point that I want to make, this one is absolutely essential, and this is focused around coping mechanisms. Okay, coping mechanisms are the biggest blocks within your occult initiatory process, and acknowledging where occultism can become the coping mechanism. So you have to be honest with yourself about what your coping mechanisms actually are. And you have to observe yourself. This is why it always comes back to present stillness and contemplation, because you have to observe yourself and see where you are trying to cope. So coping strategies are immensely normal. Okay, you're going to fall into them in your initiatory process. It happens. It is what it is. The main thing is that you are not falling a victim to them. Okay, you fall a victim to them when you try and reject the need to have coping mechanisms in the first place. You fall into coping mechanisms when you are trying to distract yourself from what is uncomfortable. Now, occult work is often the most challenging when you receive trials that are more sub-perceptual in nature. Now, what I mean by that is when the trials are a bit more subtle and they just slot into day-to-day life, very common in pathways such as the Sephiroth. So often, when nothing tangible is being felt within the body in your occult practice, this is often a call to go inward and be more present with the self, but it feels uncomfortable because it can feel like nothing is moving. This is also particularly present within Da'arthic based initiations and the realms that dwell beyond the Qliphothic structure, such as the Stellar Outlands. Okay, it can feel like nothing is actually moving in the direction that you want it to. And this can be very challenging for those fragile egos that are trying to still gain an element of control over their process. So coping mechanisms come in when you are trying to gauge too much control over your initiatory process. You are trying to find something to hold on to, but meanwhile, when your identity is dissolving, there is not going to be anything tangible to hold on to. So you need to let yourself fall into the void. You need to embrace the dissolution, but the dissolution often comes through a very challenging sensation, which is normally a sensation that you are avoiding. Be that pain in the body, be that the sensation that nothing is happening in your evolutionary path. Okay, massive one. Okay, we need to understand that coping mechanisms come in when we are trying to gauge control over what cannot be controlled. Okay, and coping mechanisms often come in when we feel like we are not doing enough within the initiatory process. It's not always coming through in the sense of, oh, there's so many emotions coming to the surface, I can't handle it. What I've seen in my process and what I've seen with others' processes as well is that coping mechanisms start to come in when they feel like nothing is happening, or they reach a point in the initiatory process where they can't actually see where they are going, and they can't actually tell whether they are moving anywhere at all. Okay, occult work is going to take you inside. It's not going to take you out there. It will paradoxically by taking you inside. When you go inside and you go internal, the proof of you doing enough has to be severed. The external progress towards evolution and this thing that you are projecting onto yourself about needing to evolve in this way, or I'm here in my initiatory process, all of this needs to go because you are becoming fluid. This is what evolution is all about. Embodying fluidity, genuine integration. So coping mechanisms are something that you need to welcome, something that you need to take accountability for, and get to know when they start to come up in the process. Get to know when coping mechanisms start to rear their heads and what state of being they tend to come up in the form of. What state of being they tend to start to come through. Okay, do they come through when you're feeling a particular emotion? Do they come through when you're feeling a particular aspect of vulnerability? Becoming that present with yourself and the ability to observe yourself in that way is absolutely essential so that you don't fall a victim to your coping mechanisms. Now, it's easy for occultism to become coping mechanism, okay? It's easy for spirit work to become the coping mechanism, as we discussed within the previous mistakes in terms of moving too quickly, not being present, and all kinds of things like that. The human mind is always trying to feel enough. It's always wanting to feel enough. It's always wanting something external to define its sense of self by. But this is not sustainable within this initiatory process. This is not sustainable if you are wanting to effectively ground occult-based initiatory energies. So the next mistake is impatience. Very, very big. And again, these are all interlinked. Impatience comes from ultimately needing to be at a certain point, having this idea of where it is you need to be in your initiatory process, and then projecting that into your practice. Impatience is a very, very common mistake and can keep you running on that illusionary treadmill, striving towards something that does not actually exist. In my view, embodying the perception that the future that you are trying to strive towards is somewhat a mirage and is a thought form that you are trying to project your self-worth onto is a very helpful approach when it comes to occultism, because it brings you back into the present moment, and impatience can very easily lead to deeper levels of fragmentation, because when you feel impatient, it means that you are not feeling enough as you are, which means that you then have a low sense of self-value. So if you start to feel impatient, this is when you have to explore where this impatience is coming from. Where is the urgency? So many occult practitioners have an urgency. I need to do all of this. I need to do all of that. There's a huge urgency to get the ball rolling with these energies. And if you are going into it for the purpose of your evolution, I get it. Okay, you want to evolve quickly. You want the stuff to come to the surface quickly. You want to process quickly, but you can only move at your soul's pace, in my experience. Okay, I've had times as well where I have got impatient in my initiatory process, and I've tried to, say, move on to a later stage of my initiations, and the initiatory door hasn't actually opened properly because my true will isn't fully on board with it. Okay, so your soul has to be aligned to what you are actually embarking on. Okay, and you have to have different parts of you that are actually on board with what it is that you're doing. You have to develop that regular, again, contemplation, but also communication with your inner child and the comforting of your inner child. You know, understanding that the inner child is the purest expression of the soul and the purest expression of the true will. So impatience often comes from a parental part of you that is trying to force the inner child to be something that it doesn't want to be. So understand here that impatience is the biggest thing that takes you away from yourself, but impatience comes through when you are not feeling enough as you are. So you need to explore why you are not feeling enough as you are. Another mistake that is linked to that also is illusion of grandeur, thinking that you have come further than you have. Okay, illusions of grandeur comes through as a protective mechanism. I have got to here in my occult work, so then I don't have to do anything anymore. Very, very common within different types of people who boast about their initiatory processes, people who boast about finishing the Qliphoth. Anybody who says that they have finished the Qliphoth, finished the Sephiroth, is lying. They are operating from a space of a massive illusion of grandeur. And illusions of grandeur are just immensely common within spirituality as a whole. An illusion of grandeur is established in order to keep yourself safe from deeper levels of vulnerability. So it's easier to think, okay, I've attained this and I've attained this state of evolution. You see it all the time with the great work. Okay, people want to attain the great work. They want to attain the philosopher's stone. They want to attain the deified state of consciousness. Anybody who gets to the point in their initiatory process whereby they are said to have completed the great work, who do not feel somewhat that this is a hollow victory and that the work is unfinished, they are living a lie. They are living a lie. And ultimately, when it comes to these illusions of grandeur, they then get caught in this space of like, okay, I don't need to do any more work, when in reality they have opened themselves up to continuous soul evolution, and evolution is ongoing, fluid. You're continuously moving, continuously evolving at the pace of your soul. So you have to keep your ego in check. When I say keep it in check, I don't mean reject it. I don't mean try and destroy it. I mean observe it. Observe yourself, and don't be one of those many occultists that fall into that space of wanting to be seen as this great and powerful being in a dark hooded cloak. It is all noise. Another mistake, I'm listing loads of mistakes here, but another mistake that I see within the occult sciences, and I've experienced this one numerous times with myself, is attaching to somebody else's story. Okay, this is very big. The occult is full of stories. Stories of cursing people, stories of vampirism, stories of the great work, stories of chakra dissolution, stories of transcending the reincarnation cycle. When you get to a certain point in your process, you will likely start to realize, if you are doing the work, that a lot of these stories are in fact hollow intentions built off of escapism. Okay, so these attachments to set stories stop you from developing your own gnosis. Okay, occult work is about developing your own gnosis in harmony with your truth and authenticity. Your own gnosis is what guides your initiatory path, and many are not ready to lead. Many are not ready to be the leader of their life, so therefore are looking for a story to attach to. Okay, the amount of times I've seen people attach the story of, oh, when I cross the abyss, I become a vampire. Or, oh, I want to become a vampiric energy. I want to become a vampiric being. I want to become an undead god. Okay, I want to transcend the cycle of reincarnation. As much as these are valid, if you attach to these stories and you define your evolutionary process by these predefined stories, then what's the difference in you being a religious person and attaching to the paradigm of religion? What is the difference? Okay, if you are attaching to this predefined story that isn't what you gain through your own experience, but is what you have been fed by somebody else, then what's the difference in attaching to a religious paradigm? So understand that people's gnosis, including my gnosis, is a story, okay? A story that is coming from their own personal experience. Now, understand that many of these stories aren't actually coming from the individual either, okay? This is the other thing. Many practitioners want to regurgitate information. Okay, so they're looking for information that they can then use to define their sense of self by then regurgitating it to a different crowd so that they can feel enough about themselves. But there is no greater way of limiting your own evolution than attaching to a story. Okay, occultism is a dissolving process. Real occult initiation comes through dissolution and the embracing of paradoxical ascent. You go inwards to then go further outwards. You die to then be reborn. So the whole point is to dissolve archetypes, to dissolve stories and create your own stories. If you are trying to find a story to attach to, the amount of people that have commented on my videos saying, how do I know if you're speaking the whole truth? And my response is gain some fucking sovereignty and discern for yourself. Okay, discern for yourself using, am I feeding my fragmentation or am I feeding my vulnerability? What am I feeding when I absorb this information? Am I trying to find information that I can then define my sense of self by? So then my ego has something to hold on to. It comes from the concept that nobody is speaking the entire truth. Everybody is speaking either gnosis that they have gained themselves or gnosis that they are regurgitating from somebody else. That is the harsh truth. So what type of practitioner are you going to be? Are you going to be the type of practitioner that is ultimately discerning the information that you are receiving? You are using people's teachings to absorb and feed your own process to understand your process more so that you can work towards developing your own gnosis and your own stories? Or are you doing what the majority of practitioners do? And that's listen to a primary teacher and try and absorb everything that they are receiving. There is no optimal truth. The truth is subjective. Discern for yourself. This is your initiatory process. So the attachment to stories is a very, very big mistake in occultism, simply because you then start trying to live out somebody else's initiatory process without realizing that it's all about your process, your sovereignty, your evolution. Absolutely essential. Okay, but to really wrap this up, it all comes down to presence. It all comes down to stillness. It all comes down to how willing you are to sit with yourself, how willing you are to lead your life, and more than anything, how truly committed you are to your ongoing evolution. Many want the idea of evolution. They like the idea and the mystical aspects of being a black magician, entering the Sephiroth, entering the Qliphoth, doing all of these different things. But then their evolutionary intention crumbles under pressure. As soon as their ego is threatened, they then fall into coping mechanisms. They try and move into the next spirit that they are to work on, and different things like that. So understand that these core mistakes are easily avoided through presence, through stillness, and through a genuine intention to integrate your trauma. Don't be one of those occultists that regurgitates the same story over and over again. It's boring. So I think that's everything that I needed to speak about in today's topic. I do recommend watching this video again, as there is a lot of information in it. And ultimately, they are very easily avoided, these mistakes. But if you fall into them and you're unaware of them, it is very easy to re-traumatize yourself, which is why they are damaging mistakes if they go unchecked. But for now, thank you guys. Be sure to check out my Patreon. Be sure to hit like and subscribe if this video was helpful to you. And I will see you in the next video. Thank you.